Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout and to our show, The Issues and Challenges in Today's Fire Service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky. I currently have the honor of serving as Interim Fire Chief with the Trophy Club Fire Department in Texas, another great fire department with some absolutely incredible firefighters and officers, and joined by my partner, our co-host, my partner on Humpday Hangout, Assistant Chief Terry McGrath from Louisville, and we got the boss with us, Chief Bobby Halden, Editor-in-Chief of Fire Engineering Magazine, and head of our FDIC Incredible Conference, and a whole bunch of other things like we always talk about. Folks, we've got an incredible show today. To say that it's an honor to have our two guests with us, I don't think that's even appropriate. In light of everything that's been going on with our law enforcement family, and I'll just call it what it is, the murders of some incredible police officers, and everything else that's going along with that, we were blessed to have two great folks jump on the show with us today and discuss a couple things with us. Let me give you a little background on our two guests. And first, before I do that, by the way, if you have any questions, if you hit us on Twitter, make sure you add hashtag FETalk. That's for fire engineering. So hashtag FETalk, and we'll try to get those addressed. Don't forget to watch your roll call tips on FDIC.com. But again, if you have any questions, if there are questions that our guests can answer, we will. If not, we may have to just say we can't get to that. But our guests, again, are just absolutely incredible, two individuals. We've got, from the Dallas Police Department, Senior Corporal Chris Webb. Chris is a native Texan born in Dallas, Texas. He served for 20 years with the Dallas Police Department. The last 10 years on their SWAT team and serves as a sniper. His wife is a judge in Tarrant County. We'll need to have to ask about that. But Corporal Webb is a Dallas Police Association representative for Special Operations and another incredible individual. And we're also joined by Battalion Chief from the Dallas Fire Rescue, Tami Kayea. And I said that right, Tami? Kayea? Yes. I got it right. Chief Kayea has been with the Dallas Fire Rescue for 19 years. Has been a Battalion Chief for the past 6 years. Chief Kayea spent 3 years as Section Chief of EMS and the other 3 as Battalion 1. This, for all you looking to pursue your higher education, is pretty cool. We always try to mention she has her master's degree in management and leadership, and she completed the executive fire officer program. So for those of us that do recruiting, we know how important that is, that folks are stepping up and spending their time. So Tami and Chris, welcome to our show. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Terry, do you want to jump in there, buddy?
No, I too want to say thanks so much for spending an hour with us today. And I was really fortunate when we started the hunt to find a couple of people to join us and having some conversations with them about what happened on July the 7th. And I think we're pretty fortunate to have these two outstanding individuals help us out today. And I know we've got a lot of things that we want to cover. And hopefully this will be pretty informative to our listeners.
Well, and you know, we can't start things off without just expressing, and I want Chief Halton to jump in here as well, as our condolences for the 4 DPD officers and the DART officer. I know that's another one family there in Dallas. And when it comes to law enforcement, you have 5 of your officers, your family murdered and more injured. And then they have, we were talking about this off-air, folks, that, you know, it's one thing a lot of us have responded to mass shootings before, and we get there, we take care of the civilians, and off we go. But for Chief Kayea, for the Dallas Fire Rescue, that's their family. To pull up on that kind of a scene, first of all, an active scene, you know, it's incredible. So our thoughts and prayers are still with everybody. This is far from over, and it's far from over, and I know how you're dealing with it, but we just wanted to make sure we got that out of the way with all due respect and honor to the Dallas Police and Fire Departments. Bobby, did you want to jump in there, buddy?
In my memory, I can't remember a time when I think that the American sense of propriety has been more disrupted and more saddened. There can be no more deeper wound inflicted to our sensibilities and our morality than what we're witnessing now in this incredibly misguided assault on the men and women who, by choice, have decided to place themselves in the most dangerous occupation in the world in order to fulfill what they feel is their duty to their fellow man and their community. And so, on behalf of myself and everyone at Penwell Publishing and Fire Engineering, our deepest sympathies and condolences to all affected. But more importantly, I would like to just express our unrelenting commitment to supporting you and praising you and being there for you as best we can. And my gratitude to our two guests today who, during this incredibly difficult time, have decided to come on and share what they can about that event so that others around the country can be better prepared. If this madness continues, and I can't think of a more appropriate word. And you know, that being said, please know that the people of America respect and love you, and our hearts couldn't be more devastated by Dallas's loss and Baton Rouge's loss and Kansas City's loss in these last few days. And our prayers are with you that this stops and that sanity returns. And thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chief.
And I guess let's jump to I'll call you Chris. I know it's Senior Corporal Webb, but I want to be a little more personal with your brother. But Chris, you know, and you're very much involved with the Dallas Police Association, which EPA does incredible things to represent their members. In fact, they represent everybody. I watch it all the time, and I rightfully so. Bobby and Terry, I brag about a lot of agencies all across North America. Dallas PD, Dallas Fire are two absolutely incredible. The leadership, the talent, the people you have there, we know so many. It's so close to us. First off, that two incredible institutions. DPA is very much into the. Are they not involved with what do you? I guess what are you doing? What are you doing for your folks? I mean, I know you guys have all kinds of programs, but I just can't imagine. You know, we dealt with 9/11, but it's not just. It wasn't just a singular. That you're dealing with the loss of these officers that were murdered and injured, and now you're dealing with also trying to get people to stay vigilant, to stay on the job, to want to come to work. And I think you see them they're putting more forward when it comes to taking care of people than ever before. A lot of people think they're turning the other way, and you know what? They may have a little bit of a breath, but I think recruitment's up in a lot of places, so on and so forth. So what's Dallas PD doing right now for their members?
Well, the police department offers a lot of psych services and whatnot for people when they're involved in shootings, but there's a gap for those who are part of that process but actually weren't trigger pullers, as I call them. So one of the great things about the DPA is the Assist the Officer program, Assist the Officer Foundation, and we offer counseling. It's totally paid for by the ATO. The officers can get signed in, signed out. No one knows who they are. So there's sometimes where maybe had been a stigma about talking to people back, when I first started. You didn't do that. You just, you dealt with it. Well, I think we're getting better at letting people know you need to go talk about this stuff. And it's one of the good things about the ATO and what they offer is that free counseling that no one has to find out about it. You just go in and you talk, and it's probably one of the best things that DPA offers. Not to mention, I wish I could have showed y'all, all of y'all could have seen the outpouring and the support from the citizens from not just from Dallas, but all over the nation. People have traveled and I've witnessed them come to me and say, hey, we were on our way to vacation in Colorado, but we rerouted, so we wanted to see the memorial. We wanted to see what was going on here. And between that and our law enforcement brothers and sisters that have come from Canada and all over the U.S. to come and stay for the week and attend the funerals or answer calls or help with the funeral, it's really amazing. It's heart-touching. Y'all understand it. I wish that the citizens could see how much and the stories that were out there. So I do feel like our department, you know, we're wounded, we're hurting for sure, but we have a lot of support. I feel much love right now, but you know, there's also something going on in America that we didn't create. I don't feel like we've created it, but we definitely are left with dealing with it. As Chief Brown said, you know, we got a dog problem, it's police problems. You know, we take all the problems and they all fall in our lap, as y'all know, because y'all deal with them just like we do, with the mental health issues and over and over, and the you know, so we're surviving. I'll put it that way.
Well, and I think what's happening is, for a lot of people, for whatever reasons, it's backfiring. If you think you're going to hurt law enforcement right now, not only is fire backing you more than ever, but the public, I think, is really stepping up. You just said it. It's churning more of a support than ever before. I think those that are out there that are still very dangerous, obviously, are becoming more of that smaller group, and there's a much larger group that back up and support and love their police officers, their law enforcement, you know, as a whole. Chief Tami, you know, same thing you responded to your family. You responded to you shared something a little bit earlier. I'd like you to, as well, as one of the police officers in one of your firehouses, I think, earlier. What's DFR doing for their members as well? And you know, I mean, there's very much, obviously, a closeness there between the two departments. You're one family.
Without a doubt, it's been very hard. Station, you know, the station that's downtown that was first in on is also the station that a number of the officers come by, especially the ones who work Central Business District, and they actually assisted the police in getting him out of the police car and into the ER, and they recognized him right away, and they realized who it was. And when they talked to me later, they told me, you know, we were playing ping pong with him just last shift. You know, he came to the station and was playing ping pong with us on his break. And so, you know, we do have a very active CISM team. We've had a team for, I believe, about 19, 20 years now. I've actually been on it for 17 years. And so the good thing is it was a real tough go for a while trying to get the firefighters. You know, I mean, we literally had to get policy that said you have to do it. You don't have a choice. You have to be in the debriefing. And we really don't have to rely on that anymore. I mean, most of the guys have recognized the importance of it. And we did on this one. We kind of took a little bit of time to explain to them, because we treated this as a line of duty death. I mean, just like we do our own line of duty deaths, we saw the loss of the police officers the same as the loss of our firefighters. So we actually didn't debrief until after the funerals, because we all felt like we were still in that incident until we were able to, you know, to try to get through the funerals and start to try to find some sense of closure over it. But we did do debriefings with all the members that were there and a part of the incident.
Well, and Terry, I want you to jump in there. I know you had a specific question about the planning and training and everything that goes into these as well. But Chris, you mentioned Chief Brown. You know, we follow each other on Twitter, and you know, being the boss is always hard. It's easy to pick apart. Chief Halton's fire chief for a long time. Terry's up there, myself, and you know, it's easy to the chief always has the bullseye on their back, but I will tell you, speaking as an outsider, I mean outside the city of Dallas, your chief has more fans right now for how he represented you and your department than ever before. Absolutely incredible. Some of his statements. There's a lot of people that use it as a political posture, and you know, for the wrong reasons. He didn't do that at all. The man was absolutely incredible with his support for everybody, and how he answered everything, and how he spoke at the memorials and at the funerals was just like I said. Anybody can pick all they want about a boss, and there's always headbutting between associations and the chiefs, and all that happens everywhere, fire and law enforcement both. But Chris, he really has done an incredible job as your boss with representing Dallas PD.
Yeah, you know, I will say this: he's a former SWAT guy, right? And so he is an amazing critical incident commander. He has done an outstanding job. I think some of his opponents or people who have been outspoken against him over the last couple months or last year and a half, everybody kind of all together said, you know what, he's got this one down. He's handled this. I will tell you, I've been proud to be a Dallas police officer. Where that's been rubbing off a little bit, you know, you're getting into 20, you're kind of getting sick of the same old. And this past, 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, I've lost time. They all kind of run together. We've been working a lot. It's changed everything, and it's good to see. It's good to have a leader like that when you need him. And he was there. He came in and he did what he was supposed to do. He led, and so I can vouch for that. We felt it.
Well, and both administrations have been very. I'm sorry, Terry. Both administrations have been very proactive, as Tami said, with how they deal with all the different issues. But you're exactly right. And just real quick before Terry jumps in there, I know I've been reading a lot about. This is almost like it was after 9/11, when a lot of our Bobby has sons that are in the military. My son's a combat corpsman. Both are combat vets. I know so many people that said, you know what, I want to do something after September 11th. I've been seeing posts all over from people I follow that recruitment is up big time in law enforcement, that people are like, you know what, I want to do something about this. I want to serve. And like I said, everything's kind of backfired on those that thought they were going to hurt the law enforcement family, and I hope that continues as well. But go ahead, Terry.
Well, I wanted to jump into a little bit about the July, thinking back to July 7th, and I'm kind of curious on both the fire and police side. I'm a little bit familiar. I've been removed from that department for a long time, but I'm assuming that as far as preparing for the protests, and if my numbers are right, I think roughly around 1,000 protesters in downtown, and I know back in the day I was part of a lot of those type of protests, big and small, but certainly nothing like this. But I think the information that I had got is roughly around 100 officers. I'm assuming, Chris, that was done obviously using, focusing out of CBD, but they bring in response teams from the other divisions to supplement, which kind of adds a question, and I was going to throw that out a little bit later on, but as I'm reading and following the story, and I'm thinking to myself, I worked downtown, so I was very familiar with every nook and cranny of downtown, and on top of that, I was a bike officer, so I knew every nook and cranny downtown. But when you're put in a car to come from North Dallas to go down there and work something, they can put you on a street corner, and that's where you are, and you only had to remember, Griffin and Main Street, and that's easy. But when things start going to hell in a handbasket, and now you're in a completely unknown environment, and so that's a challenge right off the bat. I know from we can talk about the normal things like communications, radio traffic, coordination, the span of control, and the enormous size, ever-changing size of this incident. But that was one of the things that registered with me quickly, was that when you're in a critical situation and you're truly in an environment that you're not familiar with. I remember one time I was in an area of town that I ended up there on a car chase, and when I got out, I was trying to figure out where I was, and I asked the guy, what street is this? And he laughed at me. He goes, man, you know where you are? And but as far as the planning that went into this particular incident, the normal stuff was in place. Is there anything that you can add to that, Chris, as far as, and then on the fire side, what was fires, any pre-planning done, or staged response as far as EMS and support and things like that?
Well, we've had so many protests over the last, since Ferguson incident. It's kind of become, I don't want to say it's old hat, but everything's based on size, what they expect. This was supposed to be a static protest. There wasn't supposed to be any movement. Like you said, response teams. Each of the 7 substations have response teams, so the CBD doesn't have to carry the weight of the whole thing. We've had a recent hours change with the SWAT team, so most of our SWAT guys were actually in town on tag beats, so they were close by to respond. But you can't, you have to separate the protest from the event of what actually happened. And so you have one person that came in that could have done it on any day of the week. He just happened to choose this protest night to do it, and I don't know why. I'm sure somebody will be able to dig something up to figure out some of those answers, but nothing out of the ordinary as far as protesting or how we handle them was planned. You don't know, and obviously once the shooting started, it's utter chaos. And I arrived at downtown probably about 9:20, and a shooting call came out at the Omni Hotel, and people were pouring out of the bar screaming, and there was no shooter, but the panic had set in, and so that was splitting resources, now having to go check on Omni before we could get back to the problem over at El Centro. So, there's not the only thing you can train for is to know that whatever you're training for is going to get 3 times worse because of the communication issue, right? And you have the reflection or the sound bouncing off all the buildings. It sounds like they're shooting from your right, they're shooting from your left, and he was so mobile during the shooting that it appeared to be more than one shooter, which also added to the chaos.
Kind of on a related topic to what Terry just brought up, if you don't mind, Chris and Chief Kayea, when we do scenario planning, we officer down, firefighter down, we always base it upon basically what worst case scenario was in our experience. I never dreamt 5 officers were going to be murdered in the street at one time. Much like when we have catastrophic loss in the fire service, where we have 9 firefighters or 14 firefighters. 2 questions, and this goes, we got a question here from #FEChat. He said, were we prepared for it? And my question would be, in regards to scenario planning, how has this changed, especially you, Chris, because you're involved with SWAT, and Chief Kayea, from a responding to law enforcement or responding to fire incidents? How is this going to affect our scenario planning going forward? Those kinds of numbers are staggering when you think about the complexity of it in terms of extraction, care, defense. You've got the field of fire, which was undefined in your event. You've got the triaging that needs to be done, the viability of the victims, and everything that goes along with that, the manpower involved in the extractions, the treatment, the transport, and everything that goes along with that. And then subsequent to that question, if we do create a more robust scenario, how could we ever ensure that we have the resources? In Dallas, clearly an exception because your medical community is so robust, but in many communities, an event like that, the medical system is going to collapse. I mean, it's going to be just overwhelmed. So just some thoughts, wherever you want to go with it, but in terms of scenario planning, and how did you feel about how Dallas was ready or not ready for what, based upon your training, for what you encountered that night?
Well, and real quick, I mean, with your experience as a section chief in EMS and being the first arriving battalion chief, obviously, like Chris was saying, I mean, with all that we can gain experience-wise from other cities' incidents, whether they're tragic or not, the different protests, so forth, Dallas has always been very proactive on how they handle things. You can just see that, over the years. From the fire side, like Bobby said, you get there first, and just, I mean, walk us through what you had coming EMS-wise. I know you had stuff pre-staged, and we don't want to deal in too much, of what was planned ahead of time that maybe we can't discuss, but your end of things, just like what Bobby was talking about.
Well, actually, we have certain triggers that decide what type of resources, how many resources we're going to have there. And we actually didn't have EMS pre-staged on this. It was supposed to be, as Chris said, it was supposed to be just a stagnant protest. There wasn't anything to believe that it was going to be at all violent, and the protesters themselves never really were. I mean, this was a individual that really, as far as we know, wasn't specifically associated with the protest, just took advantage of the timing. So we had sent a field supervisor, one of our EMS field supervisors, over there during the protest to monitor it and to see, to ensure that it was all going peacefully, and it was. And he actually had just left the scene. He stayed until they kind of started marching, and then he kind of went to the station nearest by and stayed there at that station. But we didn't actually have like an ambulance nearby. And again, that how we deal with the protest depends on what the protest is. When we recently had the Trump rally, yeah, we had resources galore pre-stage because, there was an anticipation of trouble. There was, such a heat issue and everything else. So it's really kind of incident by incident that we decide what we're going to send on them. One of the things that at first kind of created not some problems, but just took, when I got on scene trying to put the pieces together, is the calls started coming in, and of course, it takes a minute for dispatch to figure out what's going on, because all of a sudden they're just getting flooded with calls, and they're trying to put some sense to this. So initially we had resources that were sent on different incidents, and it was treated as separate incidents. So it took a little bit to figure out who was actually on scene, because the ambulances came, grabbed the patients, and ran, but the engines and trucks were still in the vicinity. So it was trying to figure out, because I couldn't look at just, on my little mobile computer at one incident and go, okay, this is who I have. It was trying to piece together who all was there once I arrived. So that made it just a little bit more difficult from the onset. Fortunately, though, I am stationed downtown, so I got there within a matter of minutes after it started. So that part was beneficial, and that we did have some crews there that gave some great, information from the very start. We had one engine to the south that very quickly let everybody know you can't come up from this direction. We had another engine up north that, said you're not going to be able to go any farther south than here because we're already blocked with police cars. So we did have some great initial information coming from those first arriving crews. And then when I got there, of course, because I knew it was a protest, and so I knew that that DPD would have a command, my first action when I got there was to try to locate DPD command and to get with them and to establish a unified command. Unfortunately, of course, you've got police flying in from everywhere, and it was a little hard at first to try to get exactly where they were, and to determine whether or not it was even safe enough. At one point, someone directed me towards it, and I jump out of my car and start heading down there, and all of a sudden, as I'm approaching, I realize, okay, wait, all those officers are crouched below their cars, and I'm just walking right towards them. Probably not the safest idea. So at that point, then kind of U-turned and we kind of set up then our command post until we could determine specifically where police were, because obviously they had so much going on at that moment as well. So we went ahead and at least started to establish ours so that we could start, ensuring some safety, getting good communication, getting resources down there that we needed. So I elected to go ahead and to do that. Until I knew I had a deputy chief on the way, and so I was going to focus on getting all of that set up and then let him locate DPD command when he got there.
So, Chief Kayea, just real quick on that was something that I was kind of curious about it. So the command post, initially you maintained one, PD had one, and then is the communication going through communications, or are you able to talk to anybody directly or phone to phone, or are you still working that through your dispatch?
As far as with DPD?
Yeah.
Well, the good thing is we actually, our mobile data computers, we can see when they put in information for the police officers, we can see it as well. So we were actually seeing a lot of the updates as they were putting it out. We also are able to monitor the police channel. So we quickly found out from one of the officers what channel they were on, because they have multiple, and we turned over and started monitoring their channel so that we could try to hear what they were saying and what they were finding out.
Well, I think both of you mentioned something critical here for a lot of our viewers, because there's a couple different questions. popping up about, like, somebody just asked a question, what advice can you give? You got the protests going on in Cleveland, to EMS and fire police there. You said it earlier. This wasn't a Trump rally. It was a protest, but it wasn't. You can prepare. You can't prepare for a smaller protest, if you will, the same way you would for this gigantic one. You're not going to have the resources there and so on and so forth. It just doesn't. You're not going to prepare for a high school football game the same way you would for the Super Bowl. With what you're going to do to cover it. That's the hard part, I think it is, for the two of you, for your departments. It's like you're picking and choosing. Okay, we got this. We got so many people are anticipating. So many available resources, because you're like the Sears Roebuck Fire and Police Departments. You got them. I think 58 firehouses. I think Chris, over 4,000 police officers total.
It's about 20, or I think we're approved for 32, maybe. I think 3,200. Yeah, we're not there, but
you're talking over 3,000. I mean, these are two large city departments that have unlimited resources, if you will. But the planning that goes behind it is difficult, because it's always like you plug in how many people you've got, what are you going to need, and you said it so much before the protests. And let's not forget the fact this was a peaceful. Everybody that I've talked to from your departments, and you've seen it. It wasn't out of control. It ended peacefully. And you said it, Chris, before. One person decided. The Baton Rouge shooter said he was in Dallas he admitted in his video, says he was there. He could have picked any event. He could have picked anything. He chose that one. And I think, to be honest, we were just lucky. I won't discuss it. There's a few other things that if he would have chosen to do, it probably could have been worse.
I think the big thing to look at here is you can plan for the protests, right? And the big ones and the small ones, like we did with Trump rally. Obviously, we had a ton of assets and a ton of help. You can plan for the little ones, but what you really had in this was you had a single shooter, active shooter situation amongst you had a separate from the actual protest. So you can prepare for the protest, and you can prepare for and train for an active shooter. And it just so happens that they're all getting lumped together because it was at the end of a protest. But to me, as a tactical person, I've got to look at that as I had two separate events going on. It was all in one big bundle. And so next thing you have to talk about is how are we trained for active shooters? How are we cross training with the fire department, the paramedics? We had some very brave paramedics that officers were saying, don't drive that way. And all they said was, where are your guys? We need to get your guys. And so, we've got to figure out how to be better at communicating, which, of course, as we all know, it goes to hell in a handbasket when the chaos starts, and there's always a lack of knowledge and information on the front end. We had officers that were looking at other officers thinking that they might be another shooter because they were searching certain areas and they weren't in uniform, or they were wearing a vest, but they were wearing street clothes because they came to help. So, to me, it's training on this end and training on that end, and that's what we need to get down and do. If you look at the actual closure of the active shooter portion of this, the 5 officers made entry into El Centro from Dallas and went and confronted the suspect, which is how it stopped. It went back to training. This is what we trained to do. This is what we did. This is what stopped that part of the problem, which was the active shooting, which led to the negotiation side of it. So
I think that the challenge too, Chris, is as well as Terry and Bobby brought this up. Both of your departments, Tami, you and Chris, you've trained for active shooters, and we usually do in schools, warehouses, businesses. I'm sure people have done it, but this was a whole different scenario. Everybody out there that posts they do active, we just finished our active shooter training. It was at the high school or a shopping mall or whatever. You're downtown Dallas. You said it, but you don't know where it's coming from, how many you have. It's in, Terry said, he goes, well, we just went to like a 5-block, square block active shooter scenario, and it high rises that, I mean, anybody could disappear into it. It wasn't just, no disrespect to those that have had them, the high school or a shopping mall. The enormity of the whole thing is incredible.
I can tell you when we set up our perimeter, when we basically it incorporated 50 blocks is what our perimeter ended up incorporating. We actually had to move the command post twice because we set it up and then we were told, well, there's a shooter here, and we moved it, and then they said, well, no, there's also a shooter here, so we moved it again. It seemed like at first we always seemed to put the command post where they kept telling us the shooter was. So, so it definitely was very fluid, which is normally not what you expect when you do the training. I saw someone said, we always say it's not going to happen here, and his question was, were we prepared? Yes and no. We didn't say that. In fact, we've been saying it will happen here. It's just a matter of when. I mean, we knew that eventually it was going to happen. And we just recently created a new active shooter policy. We had started training on it. We had gotten probably about, I'm going to guess, about half the department through it. Just based on, I know my district was about halfway through. So the policy wasn't officially in place. We didn't have all the gear and everything that was supposed to go with the policy because it hadn't been put in place yet. So we did have some training on it, certainly a lot of focus on it, but not quite everybody trained and not the gear that we would have liked to have had when it initially got started. So, but we did, the other part of that is the first part of the training was to just kind of give our guys a basic knowledge of it, and then the next step was going to be to actually do some tabletop exercises with the group, and then the next step was to train with DPD. They were setting up specific scenarios to run with DPD, and then even finally just one really large scenario and bring in not only DPD but all the other acronyms that like to play too. So we had that, and we were working on it. It was actively. Unfortunately, the shooter didn't wait for us to get through all of it before he decided to take action. So to answer the one question that was on there, we never said it wasn't going to happen here. In fact, we said it will happen here. We were working to get there. We just hadn't quite got through all of it before unfortunately it did happen.
Well, and the other question, and I think Terry was going to ask this as well, and someone else posted a question. We already had it written down. I think it naturally happens sometimes. You're so close, especially to a city like Dallas. Like we were talking about before, the hospital system, Bobby mentioned, would have collapsed a lot of other smaller cities. You've got hospitals, you've got places. Sometimes, it's quicker. I know the paramedics would jump on me with something that's quicker. When you've got a patrol car sitting there and you've got someone wounded, here we go. You know what? We're gone. We can get there. It's a few blocks or whatever, so on and so forth. I think you saw the question posed about the grab and go. I know my son was trained as a combat corpsman with the Navy side of the Marines. They train. They get put in those positions where they have to do what they can, find a place of safe refuge temporarily to get where they're doing. I'm going to go ahead and mute, and you guys go ahead and kind of address that with the whole scoop and run thing while they dispatch this call.
Well, I know of instances in the past 20 years where the scoop and run was probably the best option, mainly based on the geography of where they were when the incident happened. Obviously, you would rather them be able to get in the box, but if you're 6 blocks from Parkland, maybe that's the best thing. I don't know. I know that we scooped some people that night. We also transported some people from where they went down using our armored cars to another location where we could load them into the ambulance. So I'll let the battalion chief speak to what she feels about scoops and goes. I'm sure she probably has a different view of it.
Oh no. I mean, DPD. I mean, the police officers have training. They carry tourniquets. I mean, they have medical training. In fact, I joke because as we were doing our active shooter training, they're going to get gear, get some new equipment for us. And the funny thing is the police actually already have it. We don't have it yet, and the police do. So the first several patients, the first several police officers who went down were grabbed by DPD and transported to the ER in squad cars. And I 100% support that decision. I mean, they called for us. They knew we'd get there quick, but they knew those first couple needed, they could get them out faster. And they didn't know how hard it was going to be for us to get in. you know, because we're fighting against people fleeing out, we're fighting against police officers running in, you know, where are they, can we get to them? So yeah, the first few they grabbed and ran, and I think that was absolutely the right thing to do. And then once we got there, yeah, they started bringing them to us, and they brought them to our rescues, and then we went ahead and transported them. So I think, you know, I commend the decisions that were made. I think those first ones, yeah, grab them and run, and then when they realized, hey, it's been a couple minutes, I know we've got, you know, the fire and EMS help now, they brought them to us, and we took them and ran with them.
I would be remiss not to bring up Dr. Alex Eastman from Parkland. He's also a reserve officer with the police department, and he comes on a lot of our runs. He's got a whole group of surgeons that come out with us, and he's been really big in pushing for the tourniquets and the combat care and the training and getting the pack, getting the supplies and getting them passed out to the departments. I think you see nationwide more and more departments are figuring out that we are our first line medical for that little bit of time between the time the fire department can get there and the time the incident, that what we can do, we can actually do things to help. And you know, he's been huge in getting those programs started here in the city of Dallas for us.
Well, and I mentioned before, I know my son was very passionate when he was training with his Marines. You know, prior to going to Afghanistan, his first tour was they carry their trauma packs, and a lot of them prior to that he had dealt with at Twine Palms they're great Marines, but it was like just an afterthought. And he's like, no, there's gonna be times I can't get to you. There's gonna be times that, you know, several IEDs that, you know, a lot of explosions went off where they won't let him get out of his vehicle till they clear it because he's their only doc. So he was adamant about training him about the tourniquet use and about, you know, they've got morphine. There's a lot of things they have, their little kits they can carry that they can initiate care for themselves, which I think is huge now that law enforcement is addressing that as well. Bobby, you know, you and I talked real quick once before about social media when things are unraveling like this. It's so hard nowadays to control it, and that's another area that I consider you very much an expert in just because of what you're doing now. We know what happened in one particular city when 2 firefighters were killed, that one of the widows found out via Facebook. The question off to the right for our guest, and Bobby, I'll ask you first because you deal with it on that end, about streaming like the audio live when you've got an active shooter. Not necessarily that the bad guys are listening, but you know, it poses a good question about how, I don't think you can control it, but how far do you go, or what are the trap doors for that, I guess, that particular, you know, question posed?
Well, there's a responsible media outlet would never do that, obviously. We've got decades of evidence where media outlets have streamed and law enforcement's efforts have been compromised by media outlets because the bad guys have televisions and radios and now cell phones as well. We can't prevent the citizen journalist or the citizen bystander from doing what they're going to do. I think there's a public education element there that should probably go out, that if law enforcement's engaged or fire is engaged in an active event, it's probably not the best thing to do to be a citizen journalist at that point in time, because you could put lives at risk unnecessarily, including your own. That being said, pretty much universally accepted among legitimate media outlets that we don't stream anything live until it's been approved and cleared by that agency that it affects. If Dallas PD had released something, or Dallas Fire, different story. But until they release it, we would not, as a responsible media outlet. But there are irresponsible media outlets, and that's something that Chris obviously has to, you know, I know the teams practice for that, and I know that you know, Chief Kayea knows that Fire monitors those channels very closely to see what is going out and how that could impact operations. So I think that's pretty interesting. The two questions I would have, tactical medics, I know if this had been a pre-planned event, does Dallas PD and Dallas Fire participate in a tactical medic program? Or I know they wouldn't have been there for this event because it wasn't anticipated, but I was just wondering about that.
Historically, we've looked at that a number of times about creating tactical medics. Most of the time, it's come down to an issue of how you really do the training. Who's going to respond? Is it going to be on duty? Is it going to be off duty? Because we work such drastically different schedules from DPD, how are we going to make that work? So what they decided now is to essentially, to some degree, make everybody a tactical medic. I mean, that's really what our new active shooter policy went to, is we're going to some extent, not true tactical medics like those who have a program just of tactical medics, but we're basically training everybody on how to respond and getting tactical gear that our field supervisors will carry and bring to the scene, and then we'll suit up whatever medics are assigned there at the scene and utilize them. So we don't have a true tactical medic program. We're trying to kind of find maybe that middle ground right now to see how we can make that work. In fact, one of the first things I did was call for 2 of the field supervisors, because most of us thought that the gear was already on the cars because we had started the training. So we thought the gear was on the cars. We found out, of course, afterwards that it wasn't. But we did end up going and getting it at the EMS office and ended up not needing it. But we certainly were looking at that as an option of putting some of our medics into the tactical gear if DPD needed us to go in, because we knew there were still some people in the area and in El Centro specifically, and if they needed us to, then we were going to go ahead and gear up and try to go in to help with that.
Well, I know, and this is something in our program, so we've looked at all different sides of this, and do you insert a medic? I know, Chris, in your particular case, I've followed Dr. Eastman a little bit and seen, obviously there's actually an actual situation he was involved in that absolutely made a huge impact on one of your calls several years ago. But in hitting back on what you said a while ago, one of the things, and we covered this with our guys yesterday, was that our philosophy is it's an active shooter. Anyone who's shot goes to the hospital. We don't do all this triage and is your pulse this fast or that slow. Everyone needs to go to the hospital, and we have to stop bleeding. I think honestly, one of the most important things I think that has come about in police and fire is the police officers carrying these little small tourniquets and a pressure bandage, something in their pocket. And we're seeing them utilized a lot, not just for officers, but they're actually utilizing them on shooting calls and things like that. And I think they're seeing a lot of really positive results from that. Yep. And what we were trained by Dr. Smith when we adopted our program was you have to stop the bleeding. And it doesn't. Our philosophy is, we don't need a paramedic necessarily to stop that bleeding in the first 3 minutes of this thing. Anyone who can put pressure on it, put a tourniquet on it, stop the bleeding, and they need to go to a hospital. So, when we went through our situation yesterday, we had 8 victims, and there was a discussion as resources showed up to move patients out, a discussion of, well, who should go in this ambulance, which one? Finally, someone turned around and said, they're all shot, they all got to go. Put them in, get them out. And so, that's where we want the mindset of our people is that everyone in this room, in this particular case, has to go see a doctor in a hospital. And so, and it was funny watching I was an evaluator of the drill. The first 4 officers into the school building that were on their seek and kill mission, but they had a very active bystander that was trying to distract them, but they also had someone shot in the leg, and it was I wish I had it on film because the officer never missed a beat, told the lady, put pressure on that, and she turned around, put her hand on the leg, but instead of just saying, hey, sit in the corner, whatever, but part of that was because of the training he's had with the tourniquets and the pressure. He's actually a tactical operator. Just so happened he was one of the first guys through the door as a patrol officer in this particular scenario. But anyway, I think that we've seen a huge difference just with those very simple tools and procedures.
Well, I think we're lucky being in Dallas and the assets we have. Anytime we have a BP or a call out, not only are we having one of the surgeons that does what Dr. Eastman does with us. We have 4 or 5 doctors that travel with us. They rotate. But every time we're on a call out, we have DFD on standby at our command post. So we've got, Chief, what you were saying about tactical medicine. We've got the doctor with us, but we also have the ambulance there too on standby, and those those guys and girls sit out there 3, 4, 5 hours with us till we get it done, which is not, I'm sure, where they want to be, but it's there, it's quick, and it's easy. Obviously, this situation the other night is completely different than that, but that's how we handle it in Dallas on a normal call out, a normal BP.
Hey, go ahead.
I was like, so originally they asked about the social media, and like everything, it's got its good and its bad. Interestingly enough, I first became aware of what was going on when a little news alert popped up on my cell phone. That's all of a sudden I looked at my cell phone and it said shots fired at protest in Dallas, and I'm like, oh wait a second, that's right up the block from me. And so I actually grabbed my command tech and said, hey, we're going, and we actually were starting to leave before we even got dispatched to the incident because of the fact that we saw it from the news agency. But then the downside is I get to the scene, once I realized that I had really gone too far and I was actually getting into the hot zone at that point and was starting to come back to set up a command post, there were people walking towards El Centro. And, of course, with their cell phone up, wanted to videotape. And I said, hey, y'all need to turn around. We've got an active shooter down here. Are you telling me I have to? Am I legally required? I said, I'm telling you, you're walking towards a sniper who's shooting. And there could be other shooters. We're not sure. Well, unless you're telling me I'm legally not allowed, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, get shot. And so it's very frustrating because, and at that point I didn't waste time on him because my concern was we had officers down, and if you want to walk in, go ahead. I'm going to take care of the people that I've got down at that moment. But it was frustrating, because people were, you got some running out, but then you got those running in because they want to get it on videotape. Yeah. It is definitely, it's good and bad. I working special events, I learned this through our state, some of our state EMS meetings. They said, monitor your Twitter, monitor your Facebook. They said you can tell at a really large event where trouble's starting to happen if you monitor Twitter and Facebook. And there's some events I did that. And so we would just kind of move our resources and move some of our medics to another area because, through that we could tell that this area was starting to kind of get a little more stressed or starting to have more issues. And so, it can be utilized positively. It certainly causes a significant amount of trouble for us. And yet at times it can be useful.
Hey, Chris, just a little bit of a side note, I guess, and it's a little curious to me, but so on the fire side, when we commit a lot of resources to a single incident, we backfill and we have great mutual aid agreements, but that's a little bit more challenging when it comes to law enforcement. So I'm assuming this incident probably was an all-call put out to the city, so anyone who's not assigned to something, goes down to assist. So this lasted for a while, and how did Dallas, on the law enforcement side, how does Dallas transition as far as, because we all know that there's still heart attacks and there's still robbery calls and there's still but this was there's been a lot of all calls, I know, and those officer assists that come in that get, but typically they resolve themselves a little quicker, I think, maybe than this one did. So is there anything you can share as far as Dallas and how you kind of ramp up? Is that off-duty people, or what do you do?
Yeah, well, they had the response teams at each station on each shift. They were activated, and then I know for a fact that I believe around 3:30, a lot of the off-duty officers were starting to get called in a little early. No traffic got called in early, and we also had a lot of mutual aid pretty early on. Also, we had several game wardens that were in town searching for an SMU officer that had drowned, and they're still looking for him. And they came out. They just said, hey, where do you need us? What do we need to do? And we had a lot of that. And of course, the FBI also got called out around 9. They came and assisted us. So there's a lot of assets getting pulled in from the state, from the cities nearby. Of course, by the next day, Dallas didn't even have anything to do with the crime scene as far as holding the crime scene. That was all done by the state police with help from some other local agencies. They just flooded the area with extra troopers. And so the call answerers that weren't busy probably got sent. The ones who were on calls probably stayed up on their patrol divisions, which is a really hard thing to do as a police officer when you know you want to be downtown. And just like y'all, when there's a big fire on TV, y'all all want to be there, right? You don't want to be sitting at home watching it.
Well, that's something that you know, I always talk about this, but discipline. And of course, in a tactical environment, you guys are the poster children when it comes to discipline and having, you know, whatever your assignment is, that's your assignment. You complete your objective, and that's it's easy for me because I spend 98% of my time sitting behind a desk, so I haven't been out in the field in a while. So it's easy for me to preach. You got to have discipline. You got to have discipline. But I mean, we all know getting caught up in the moment, and when things get dynamic, that's absolutely challenging. So you know, I'll say this. I mean, we praised Dallas at the beginning of the show, but I'll honestly say, as someone who worked there for a little while, that academy, although is excruciatingly long, is some of the best training I've ever received in my life. And there are things to this day, 20 years removed, that I can still recite to you. And at the time, you're beating your head against the wall. You're like, come on, I just want to go out and do something real and fun. But and I've had just the utmost respect for that, your tactical teams as well, because you know, although you bear the lot of the jokes that went around there, you spend a lot of time doing your hair in the locker room there and all that. But the training that you guys do is so impressive to watch, and anyway, my hat's off to the both of y'all's departments, because this was as challenging and as dynamic as anything I could ever imagine, and I don't know from my perspective that anything could have been done better or different.
Well, Bobby, real quick, Bobby, I know we can go a couple minutes longer if we have to, right? You've always given us that luxury.
Absolutely.
Chris, I don't know if you could talk about this or not. It's been publicized in the media. Again, we're being very careful what we ask both you and Tami, because we don't, you know, there's things you just can't talk about. How they finally took care of the suspect with the robot, I think someone said that's the first time in law enforcement history it's been utilized that way. It was absolutely just the initiative, the thought behind it of not placing any more officers' lives in danger was pretty incredible. You know, to do that, I know it had been considered before, but really showed something what was going on thought-wise with your folks as to how can we protect our officers even further. We've got to take care of business. We can't, 2 hours or so of talking with this individual isn't working, and it seems like all this person wants to do is hurt more people, the public and us. You know, I know, again, I don't know if you can talk about that at all, but it's been, you know, a lot of things have been talked about that. That was pretty incredible, the thought process behind it.
Well, I see one of the questions up regarding that, and as far as that decision, that decision rested solely on Chief Brown when we presented it to him, and we gave him the facts about why we wanted to do it, and he obviously not. It's not a decision that's easily done. It's you know, anytime. I commend him for listening and looking at it from our point of view. Our EOD has been Dallas police officers. At one point, they'd moved under the fire side, and they are actually working for the fire department. I think they've moved back to the police department now. You know, I don't know on the question directly deals with devices, suspected devices, and obviously it's a mutual response with fire and police. I don't know if that's answering his question, but you know, it's a little bit different that we've had the fire department actually held it for a while, and then they've given it back to the police department, but it's been some police officers for the whole time. And the decision is, again, it was, I don't think something that Chief Brown obviously would ever take lightly, and it was, but as you said, there was, well, y'all know what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
To answer a little bit, maybe as far as what he's wanting to know, what the fire department involved with it, certainly it was certainly police's decision. Where we did come in was we actually brought some additional SCBAs in case the SWAT officers, there was some concern about, you know, the breathing environment afterwards. So we brought some additional SCBAs to the scene should they want to utilize those. We got apparatus standing by with the guys fully bunked out, ready to go should the detonation cause a fire that we needed to then quickly respond on. So they did, you know, let us know what was going on so that we could start to get all of our stuff in place and be prepared for, you know, whatever may or may not have happened.
Well, and I do have to say this because, you know, I've been getting, I know Bobby has and Terry, I've been getting hammered on Twitter with not only has our fire engineering folks been posting them, but the questions, and I've got no less than 4 of this, an hour isn't long enough. People are really dialed into what the two of you are talking about, and absolutely incredible. As we move towards kind of closing things out here, one of the questions we had talked about posing was, and maybe we'll throw this to maybe Chris first, then Tami, is if there were 3 chunks of advice, we talked about components for an incident commander, or let's just broaden it. Terry was looking more or less from the incident commander's viewpoint. Chris, from your end, if there were 3 chunks of advice you could give those of law enforcement and fire from your end. Again, you're assigned 9 years to the SWAT team as a sniper. You're very well, obviously, expertly trained in what you do. What advice would help me out? You know what I'm saying? We've got all the viewers and everybody else. What advice would you give? Maybe 2, if you can't do 3, what would you give to folks out there about everything?
Well, the first thing is to plan on the chaos. I mean, we say that all the time in training. Oh, it'll be so hard to communicate, but the reality is it's impossible. You know, one of the questions was media was reporting 3 shooters. It's because we didn't know. And so when you're building the scenarios, you know, we have a new model for this. Every scenario we've built, it's been because something has happened, and we're trying to make it better, how we responded better. So the next time we plan this big scenario, you know, you have to plan for chaos and misinformation. Plan on the misinformation. Plan on and still finding a way to tackle the problem. You know, we went off the line as a SWAT team early on a different radio channel that we normally work on, so we didn't have to listen to everything that was going on. And our little incident command, which was our back of a Tahoe 1 block away, had a lieutenant with one radio and a lieutenant with the other. And if there was important things that needed to be broadcast to us, they would do it, but we weren't catching all of that information because we didn't need all of it for the problem we were working. But, you know, I think that's it. When you're planning your training, plan for chaos, plan in misinformation, plan in wrong parts of the scenario that you know aren't really what you're going to do in the scenario, but make your officers and your firefighters think that this is the way it's going and have it not go that way. Because that's probably the hardest thing to overcome is not knowing what's going on.
Awesome, absolutely awesome. And I think, like I said, I'm known here every time I leave this firehouse, and I've been known for years. Terry knows this. On the fire side, when I leave the firehouse, and I do it every night here, I tell the guys, think big. You know, think big. I've always been one. You can always turn folks around. You can always shut things down. Think big. Shame on you if you don't and you get caught short. I know there are some places we have people from all over the world actually, you know, that tune into this. But for those in Canada, the lower 48, there are some places where they're out in maybe a little more rural setting, so they got to start even earlier to get the help there because they don't have the resources down the street. But think big is just it is, and I love that. Plan for the chaos. Plan for things not going right. I think sometimes we think we do and we don't. So that was absolutely awesome. Chief Tami, what do you got? If you had a chunk of advice, you were first to battalion chief. I don't even call it a nightmare, but I mean, you know, incredible. But advice from your end.
You know, I think sometimes we say it so much it becomes cliche, but safety. You know, you can't, as dangerous as a situation as it was, you've still got to try to do what you can to make it as safe as possible. One of the first things I did is I told my guys, I said, put on your traffic vests, put on your bunker gear, put on whatever you can so that you don't look like police. Because at night, in our pants and T-shirts, we look like the police. I said, make sure that there's a distinction there. And then, you know, we all kind of got too close at first. You know, Chris mentioned the one rescue, and you know, they weren't thinking really about the danger. All they were thinking is, there's an officer down. Where is he? Just, you know, yeah, okay, we'll go. Just give us the, you know, give us the officer. The first engine got really too far down, and at one point they abandoned the engine to go and find safety behind a building. So we had to move the command post twice because we got too far. So, you know, you've still got to try to provide what safety you can, because if something happens to us, not only do we create more victims, but we reduce the number of rescuers. So it's not about a macho thing of wanting to you know, get in there and be in the danger. It's a matter of being smart and you know, not creating more of a problem and taking away from the resources that are there. We, you know, keep those old policies and procedures that have never been used. All of a sudden, one day they're going to be used. The very fortunate thing, and I guess, you know, we may have to thank Trump, because of him coming to town and the protest, a lot of us had taken the old civil disturbance procedures off the shelf and dusted them off and had looked at them and kind of read back through them and trained all of our guys on civil disturbance again when the Trump rally came in. And essentially that's the policy we ended up using. And as far as anybody can remember, it's never been used before. But that's what we went in. We set up a perimeter. All of the dispatching within that 50-block area was done by myself and by command. We dispatched anything within that entire area from a staging area that we set out just outside the perimeter. Nobody went in or out without DPD escort. The other thing we learned is we need to make sure that DPD knows our procedures that involve them, because we had in our procedures they were going to escort us, but I don't think they knew that was in our procedures. Luckily, you know, within 5 minutes it was all, you know, it worked out fine. But you know those procedures, because like you said, at some point it is going to happen, and we were fortunate that we had just recently kind of dusted them off and gone over and looked at them. And the other thing I can tell you for any chiefs that are watching Incident Command, we're fortunate in Dallas in that every battalion chief has a driver, a command tech, is what we call them. Not all chiefs are fortunate enough to have that. But even with that, it's not going to be enough. You know, I pulled one of my engine companies over and just started giving assignments for command. One person was monitoring the computer in the front of our car for any of the comments, because dispatch said, you know, hey, we're putting a lot of comments on there from police. So one person did that. One person just monitored police channel. One person was scribing times and the event for us. And we had two people that honestly, we told them just to look out, because at that point we didn't have police around us because they were all sucked into the event, and we kept having people approaching us, and we didn't know why. So we actually had two guys whose job was just to watch our back for us and make sure, you know, that they weren't coming for bad reasons. So, you know, you're going to need more than what you normally do to run a command. I mean, we were actually fortunate in that the engine I pulled had an Explorer on it, and an awesome Explorer who just happened to be a police officer's son. And of course, the first thing I asked him is, you know, is your mom on duty? And he said no. I said, have you talked to her? Yes. I said, okay. But I mean, he did a fantastic job and gave us another person there to help. So I mean, literally, there were 7 of us running what we called Elm Street Command during the event. So you're gonna have to have extra people. Don't try to do it with 2 or 3 people on a large event like that. Get you lots of additional people there to help you with command.
It goes back to what Chris said about plan for the chaos and the whole thing, big thing. So awesome. Terry, as we close things out, what do you got, buddy? Terry?
You know, I just want to tell you I appreciate y'all's time and coming on here, and I agree with that comment earlier that an hour isn't enough. It's just there's so much to me that is of interest to me, and as far as you know, on the command side, and you know, you brought up some really interesting stuff in Tami, and scaling that command post to make it work for you. And again, you know, we operate with a battalion chief's driver as well. But sitting in that car when 2 radios are going just on our own between dispatch and a fireground channel, and then trying to look out the window and trying to record information, and it gets busy really, really fast. I can't even imagine the scale of what this incident took. And again, my hats off to Dallas Fire Rescue. My hats off to Dallas Police. This was an absolutely tragic day, but I guess if you have to look for some positive things out of this, you know, as Chris alluded to in the beginning, I think Chief Brown's comments were dead on probably when he says police, they don't, you know, see support most days, and let's not be most days, but the amount of generosity and support that I've seen from looking from the outside, and I think there's overwhelming support out there. It just unfortunately takes something like this for people sometimes to step forward. But you find a little bit of peace and comfort in that, and I think that's important. But anyway, my hat's off really to both y'all's organizations and to the DPA, your Assist the Officer Foundation, the steps that you guys are going through to step up. And I know unfortunately you're used to doing that on a 1Z scale. With an organization your size, to do it on the scale you're doing it now, that's stressful, and that's pretty consuming of that organization, and my hat's off to you and that entire staff.
Well, before we throw it to Bobby to close things out here, a couple of things I have for both of you. First of all, like I said when we started it, I can't thank you enough. Honor isn't the right word to use to have you here. You know, I can't tell you how proud I am as a Texan, as a public servant, as a whole. That particular incident, police officers didn't run away; they ran too. Not even knowing. Fire personnel ran too. You know, that in itself is an example of what we all stand for, but more importantly, what they do in the city of Dallas. It was absolutely incredible to see both your departments respond to it how you did. The prayers, people have been posting prayers. I want you to know them. You know, there's a ton on Twitter, obviously, just while we're doing the show. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions today, but absolutely unbelievable that the city of Dallas has reacted to it the way they did in such a professional manner as a whole. 2 departments that have incredible reputations, incredible leadership up and down the ladder, that really truly do get along, and very proud organizations, and justifiably so, because there's a lot of people out there who have a hard time making that all happen, and Dallas PD, Dallas Fire Rescue are great examples to those that are out there wanting to look to a department, whether you're fire, police, that get it and do it right. So thank you two so very much. Bobby?
Echo Ricky. Tremendously grateful to you both for taking the time to do this. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on today. Chief Kayea, to your point, there are now fatigue uniforms being sold by all the firefighter fatigue uniforms being sold by all the vendors of the PPE that don't look like law enforcement officers, as Ricky and Terry look today. I mean, if to the untrained eye, looks very police-like. And no disrespect to Chris and all our police brothers, we love you. But I actually, during my career, during a very stressful moment, I had a police officer grab me and say, "I need you to take that point." I said, "I'm a firefighter." He goes, "Oh, damn!" He goes, "You guys look like us." And it was, you know, a funny moment, but there are some fatigue uniforms out there that I would encourage all our listeners to take a look at. They're very useful for confined space rescue, automobile accidents, everything else we do other than fighting fire, and distinctly look like firefighters, which is a benefit to law enforcement and us and to the public we serve. But again, just to echo Ricky, thank you so much, and I really hope you know that the folks who do not love and respect law enforcement are the outliers. I'm not sure how they came broken from the factory like that, but clearly there's some horrible disconnect between their understanding of what you really truly stand for, believe, and emulate, and their perception. And hopefully through time and understanding, they'll come to realize how wonderful everyone involved in law enforcement is. Obviously, everybody has a crazy uncle in the basement, but they're the rare exception. And God bless you for what you do. Thank you so much for being here today. I just can't say it enough.
Well, I think our good friend Marcus Cottrell, Navy SEAL Marcus Cottrell, is a friend of ours, said it best. Bobby, you remember the post you and I were talking about, and he posted it to everybody in Dallas saying, and everybody in law enforcement job, especially in Dallas, he's a very strong Texan, as you know. He said the people that are supporting you the most are the ones you're going to hear from the least, because they're those of us that go to bed every night knowing that you're there for us when the wolf comes knocking. And he couldn't have said any better, because sometimes it's not everybody stepping up and saying there's literally millions of people that love and appreciate what fire and especially what law enforcement does for us. And we just don't say it enough. I did a blog right before any of this on Bobby's blog. It has me doing a Firefighter Nation call When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a Police Officer. And it was just that we need to hear more kids saying that. We need to hear more kids saying
You were misguided as a youth. You were weak at home.
Well, we're going to ask our guests to hang in there for a second. Don't disconnect, guys. But today was just incredible. I have no other words for it. Our next show day, folks, for this particular show is August 17th. As we say all the time, pretty much every Wednesday you can catch another great show, as well as the radio shows in the evening to tune in with another great group of guests like we had today. We're on Facebook and Twitter. If you need us, give us a holler. We never finish this show, our radio show, without reminding you to please keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and especially right now more than ever, those serving in law enforcement. Pray for them, be there for them, shake their hand. They just want to know you're there for them, and reach out to them. If you're in the fire service, more than ever, have them over for a meal. This is our time for our two families to really come together, because never forgetting means never forgetting. Thank you, everybody. Be safe. Hang in there. We'll be with you in a second. Shannon, let us know when we're off. God bless you, everybody.